Teachers have to do summative assessments as well as formative assessments. And there's nothing in the ideas about formative which are necessarily in conflict with summative assessments, although reconciling different practices between the two might be important. All I think about that is that often summative assessments are done too frequently, whereas one has to ask what they're for. Now, if they're for making a decision about a pupil's future, then that matters. But otherwise, what value can they have for learning? Well, they can have some value for learning if you use them in a formative way.
Okay, I've photocopied some questions from the SATS papers, and I'm going to ask them now to answer the questions, discussing with their partner, and then they're going to be shown the real mark schemes so that they can actually mark their work related to a proper SATS mark scheme. Well, it helps them to see that they can pick up method marks for just writing a certain amount down. They don't have to do the whole question and get the whole question right. They can actually get quite a considerable amount of marks, even if they got the wrong answer, just by showing the method. And I think it's quite revealing to children to see, oh, I'd have got a mark if I'd just put that down. And using the real mark schemes helps them to make progress from the SATS papers.
We have to take part in summative assessment, whether that's external exams or whether that's some kind of teacher summative assessment, but we have to do that bit. We have to do the measuring at some stage. But it's important to use formative practice to make sure that the kids become more successful learners, more independent learners, and as a result of those exercises are more successful in terms of the summative assessment, which is the high stakes testing for them.
It's important in learning that you get wise about how to steer yourself. That is, you will not always have a teacher. The good learner is one who learns to be independent or learns to learn with colleagues.
Yeah, you felt confident, or it looked like you felt confident doing it.
You got good links in between them.
Yeah.
But just every one thing, work on your sort of body tension.
Yeah.
You're sort of like, I can see your face.
When I started with trying to do some peer assessment, I thought it would be great, because it just meant I didn't have to do the marking, and okay, swap books, mark each other's work, there we go. And it doesn't work at all. It's much more complex than that to prepare, because you really need to have thought out exactly how the kids are going to make those judgments on each other's work.
I give them the answers to go through, and they've got a model set of answers, and they have to decide what the person whose work they're marking is good at, what they're not so good at, what they need extra help with. And they do a comment to each other on those tasks, and then they have to decide whether their partner deserves the merit. And they are incredibly fair. They will say to each other, well, you obviously haven't spent very long on that, look at the state of it. They don't say, oh, you have a merit because I gave you, I'll give you a merit because if you give me one. They just don't do that. They are very, very honest and quite frank with each other in a way that I think teachers can't always be quite so blunt.
If they're using peer assessment well, then they start to see themselves as someone who can make judgments about the quality of work, who can give advice on how to improve work. And if they see themselves as someone who can do that, then they start to be able to do that more successfully on their own work as well.
Clearly children get feedback from classroom discussion, but they also get particular specific feedback when their books are marked or when products they produce in projects are actually marked. In the past, what teachers have tended to do is to put some sort of grade or level on it. For example, in Key Stage 3, they'll put a national curriculum level on a piece of work. This really isn't that useful always to children. It does actually show them where they're at, but not necessarily how to improve. And so what a teacher will do is to write some sort of comment on that will maybe reflect the quality of the piece of work, but also will tell them what's needed next, or at least we would hope that would be the case.
Karen Veer has been developing a comment-only approach to marking mathematics. Why does she think this is important?
I think the benefits for me of comment marking is the interaction with the child. Actually getting the child to reply to my comment, let me know that they've understood it by doing the thing that I've asked them to do. And then having a look when I next mark the book at what they put into my last comment. It's really rewarding to think that actually that child has read it, they did understand it, and now they've sorted that little problem that they might have had with a particular question. It's much more rewarding than just thinking, oh, they got 73 out of 86. I mean, that's very, it doesn't mean much to us. Whereas knowing that they can now, subtract a negative number and understand what happens is much more rewarding.
John Ryder gives time for his pupils to respond to his comments.
So giving them time in class to start the process of responding to those comments, to start moving from where their work has shown me that they are, to where I hope my questioning in their books and my comments in their books will lead them. I think we need to help them do that in class. At the start of the lesson we're going to have some response time. So you've got some time to look through and respond to your comments.
After he's marked our books, we get them back and we just do things that we need to improve on and answer his questions that he's written when he marks.
It takes a long time to write good comments in kids' books, and to mark a class set of books really well probably takes me about 3 hours to put good comments in every kid's book. So I clearly can't do that with every class every week, so I tend to aim to do that probably once every 4 weeks or so, and check their work through peer and self-assessment and by checking work in class, to make sure they get that I'm checking that they're actually getting their work done.
Classroom dialogue and questioning is one of the key features of assessment for learning. And the reason that's so is because what you need to do is try and find out what's inside children's heads. Too often in the past, teachers have asked questions where children have to try and guess what's inside the teacher's head, the expert's head. But it's actually much more fruitful to switch it around and do it the other way. Because we want to find out not just what do children know, but what do they partly know and what don't they know. Because dealing with what they partly know and what they don't know means that you can actually then set up learning experiences to make those into knows, and that's what shoots children's learning forward.
Pupils must be involved actively in their learning. You don't learn by taking in messages from people and just remembering them. You learn if you start from your existing understanding and then are changed and challenged, and in order to take on that change and challenge you've got to be involved. So what that means in the classroom is that the teacher has to help the pupils to express themselves.
In recent years, formative assessment's been increasingly seen as key to raising standards.
An open question would be one where you're asking something like, people often describe friction as being the opposite of slipperiness. What do you think? Just by using the term what do you think, they're getting straight into the idea that their opinion's being asked. One of the schools we took this into, the children started working on this, and they changed those to being fat or skinny questions. So a fat question is one that they defined as wanting more than 5 words in the answer, whereas a skinny question was less than 5 words.
It's Year 11 science class.
What we're looking at today is another one of those really big questions. Are we alone in the universe?
To create a good learning environment, you must start an activity with some evidence, some question, some task, which gets pupils thinking into it. And then you have to encourage them to talk.
Okay. In groups of 2 or 3, I'd like you to think about those 3 questions, discuss them, and also one person in your group just jot down some thoughts in the back of your book. I used to have discussions where I thought that everyone was involved, and it seemed that lots of people weren't. And I think here, every kid has actually engaged with the task and they've talked to each other about it, and I hope they know the structure of the discussion that's coming, and so they know they're going to have to listen to each other in the discussion that follows.
Often teachers allocate particular groups that become a talking group or a talking pair or talking partners. And this is so that the children can actually, when they get a question, can talk through the question, can give the benefit of sort of jigsawing their ideas together to get a group idea. And this allows them to sort out some problems as they're actually doing that. It also means when they come to actually answering the whole class feedback that they can usually say more than most individuals actually would say. So it actually helps promote the whole class feedback as well.
One of our responsibilities is to make sure that we get kids to think in our lessons. And if we're not doing that, then I don't think we're necessarily teaching them. I think we also need to find questions that kids aren't going to find easy. If they're all easy one-word answers in a lesson, then what have the kids learnt through the process of that lesson?
At Bishop Hatfield School in Hertfordshire, Alf Wood encourages his pupils to generate their own questions as a way of involving them in their learning.
I'm going to show you a picture which shows one event from the Civil War, and you have to return to your group, and on the piece of paper on your tables you have to write any questions you have about that picture, much more deeply into the source.
What's the next question?
All right, what I'm going to ask you to do is choose in your group one question which you think is a particularly good question and a possible answer. To think about what they're doing, and They don't have, if they give them too much direction, they don't think about, all they think about is knowledge and understanding, and they don't think about high level questions about theories and ideas and analysis. And what we're trying to do is encourage those skills lower down so they become more independent in their work. So when they need those skills higher up at A-level and GCSE, then they've got them already in the bank.
Teachers ask questions all the time. And many teachers aren't aware of what their questions are doing. So, a really useful thing to do is to plan questions. And not just to plan them in terms of a good question, but to think about what might be the possible answers that come out, and therefore what will I do with these answers if they do come out from the children.
We use questioning in our planning much more than we ever used to. I think in the past, the planning used to be, this is the section of the book we're using, these are some of the things that they could do, whereas now we're really thinking about, well, what questions can we ask about it, or what questions can the pupils ask about it.
If it's a discussion in the scheme of work, it will say what the lead question is, what the big question is that's worth getting the kids into groups, and it will suggest an amount of time, 2 or 3 minutes, discussion in groups, then collect back, and these are some follow-up questions that you might have ready. So certainly the questioning is a really important part of the planning, I think, and I didn't necessarily do that before.
An important strategy in making questions work well is to allow pupils time to think. What's devastating is the research evidence by Mary Budrow and others, where they measured the time interval in a classroom between the teacher asking a question and, if they didn't get an answer, asking another question or answering their own question. So what they're looking at is how much time does the teacher allow pupils to think before they answer. And the average is about 0.7 to 0.9 of a second. That's terribly short. Nobody can think out something during such a short time. They either know it or they don't.
Karen Veer uses wait time as a strategy to encourage her pupils at Lord Williams to take an active part in their maths lessons.
I want you to just think for a minute. Don't try and put into words just yet. Just try to think how we would work out the length of that part of the circle. It's called the arc length.
Tolerating a buzzer talk when you as teacher doing nothing, it's a bit scary, but it is the only way the classroom can become a place where thinking takes place, rather than being dragged along the teacher's route to get the right answers.
Of that arc there.
Would it be the arc length would be pi times diameter divided by 4?
Oh, that sounds pretty good to me. What do we think about that?
And I think if you actually give a child a chance to talk to their partner, not in a great big way, just to say, right, I've got 2 minutes now to discuss with your partner what you think the answer is, and then I want one of you to come back to me. And then if you don't tell them which group you're going to choose, and you don't ask for any hands up, you just say, okay, Chloe, what do you think? I think provided you give them the time and they know they've discussed it with somebody else, or at least one other person thinks that answer's sensible, they don't feel so embarrassed about saying their response in front of the whole class.
How No Hands usually works is that the teacher sets a good formative question, so an open question or a question that's going to be challenging, and then either gives time for the child to think, so gives wait time, or allows pupils to discuss in small groups before taking an answer. The teacher then selects who's going to answer. Right, it's not children shouting out and everybody having their say, but it's just that no hands are put up, because what the teacher's not asking for are who thinks they can answer. What she will feel is that if they've talked about it, they all are actually capable of giving an answer.
At Bishop Hatfield School, Carol Wilding uses whiteboards to help all her pupils participate in their history lesson.
So today, the first thing I want to do as a starter is I want to look at this picture on the board. And I'd like you on your whiteboards just to write down some ideas. What is this picture telling us about Hitler? Anything that comes in immediately into your minds?
Right, in that particular group I found they have been very effective, because that group is very quiet and there's only 2 or 3 students that actually tend to respond, and it gets very boring. So this gives an opportunity for me to really be aware of who's thinking.
Right, can you put your boards up please, ladies? Well done, yeah, good, strong leader, excellent. He's in.
Because if they've all got to put their whiteboards up, they've all got to have been thinking about the question. So I can look around, and also I don't have to give ownership at that point to a particular student. So if they said something really good, or perhaps it's not quite right, they're not going to be exposed. So I can see something on a whiteboard and I can ignore it, and I can pick on something, you know, which is really, really good, and I can give ownership or not ownership to it depending on how the lesson's going.
The point of it is to establish that this is not a competition to see who's fastest at getting a good answer. It's a place in which everybody has to think, and since everybody's supposed to think, and I'm trying to help everybody to do it, anybody ought to be able to offer an answer.